My name is Michaela DePrince, and I'm a ballerina with the Dutch National Ballet. I'm also the ambassador with War Child Holland and co-author of Taking Flight and Ballerina Dreams. About 2 years ago, when I began working on my speech for TEDx, someone suggested that I might want to give it a fairy tale kind of twist, because people always told me that my life was like a fairy tale. At first, I was really insulted by this because I knew about all the hard work and sacrifice that went into getting me where I am today. And I didn't think my life was like a fairy tale at all. So I gave that speech without a fairy tale twist. Then recently, I read the definition of a fairy tale. It said that a fairy tale is often introduced in the controversial phrase, once upon a time. The story is usually set in a faraway kingdom where human characters interact with evil ogres, witches, and magic or mystical beings. There is a princess in disguise who needs saving. There is a problem to be resolved. Good things coming through, like the three fairies in Sleeping Beauty. And there is often a fairy godmother, like the one in Cinderella. There is a hero who saves a princess. The good side ultimately triumphs over evil, so the promise of a happily ever after ending is realized. And fairy tales usually teach a lesson or have a theme. I said to myself, oh my gosh, my life really is like a fairy tale. So I decided to share my fairy tale with you, but only because of the final characteristics. Fairy tales usually teach a lesson or have a theme, because I would like to reach out to young people everywhere with the lesson I have to share. So I begin with my fairy tale in the precise way. Once upon a time, in 1995, as a matter of fact, a baby girl was born in a village deep in West Africa in Sierra Leone. Her name was Mabinti Bangura. That child was me. I was a princess in disguise in my fairy tale. And unfortunately, I had the misfortune of being born 4 years into the bloody civil war that wouldn't end for another 7.5 years. By then, the war would have displaced hundreds and thousands of families. Thousands of women and children would have been raped, and over 50,000 men, children, and women would have been killed. I had been born with vitiligo, a skin condition that left white patches on my skin. This resulted in me being ridiculed and harassed. The people in my village called me the devil's child. They believed that anything that went wrong was my fault, from the failure to crops to an epidemic of Lassa fever. However, my biological parents believed that I could be anything that I wanted to be. They defended me, and they knew that in my culture, my vitiligo made me unmarriageable. So they taught me to read and write and saved money for my education. They wanted me to grow up to be more than a beggar on the streets. But then the rebels killed my father. I suppose you could say that the rebels were the ogres in my fairy tale. Shortly after, my mother died, and I was alone and defenseless. After my parents died, I feared that I would always lose those I loved. So I ended up hardening my heart so that I could not lose anybody that I loved again. This became a problem I needed to resolve in my fairy tale. It would not be the only problem, but it'd be the greatest. My uncle took me in. In my fairy tale, he was the equivalent of Cinderella's evil stepmother. He was certain that I would never bring him a good bride's price, so he didn't see the point in wasting money and spending money and giving me food. So he brought me to the orphanage and left me there and never came back. Village women called aunties cared for the children in our orphanage, but not like your favorite aunties at home. These aunties were poor, uneducated local women who cooked for us, washed our clothes in exchange for food for their own children to bring home. The aunties had their favorites in the orphanage. They numbered the 27 kids in their care. Number 1 was a favorite child. Number 27 was the least favorite. Number 27 got the last portion of food, the smallest portion of food, the last option of clothes, and the clothing pile. I was number 27. And I suppose you could say the aunties were the witches in my fairy tale. At the orphanage, I made a friend. Like one of the fairies in Sleeping Beauty, she was the first good thing that came my way in my fairy tale. Her name was Mabinti Suma. Mabinti Suma was number 26, and even though she was always in ill health, she was always full of cheer and always there for me. Mabinti Suma sang to me when I was frightened. She comforted me when I was sad, defended me when I was under attack. She listened to my secrets, stuck by me when I needed her. And 17 magical years later, she's doing that as my sister. But wait, I'm getting ahead of myself. It isn't time for the happy ending yet. One morning, the harmattan, the fierce wind that blew sand down from the Sahara Desert, sent a magazine flying in my direction. It slapped me in the face. On the cover of the picture was a beautiful ballerina on point, and I suppose I was a magic in my fairy tale. That ballerina looked so happy and so content. I knew that I had to just be like this person one day. I thought that maybe if I danced like her, that I would be happy too. This ballerina became the second good thing that came my way in my fairy tale. She inspired me and gave me a dream. A pregnant teacher came to the orphanage to teach us English. I dared to love her, and she became the third good thing in my life. I learned from her that the woman in the photograph was dancing ballet. I knew that one day I too would get my pink tutu and pink satin point shoes and dance ballet. In preparation for that day, I leaped and skipped around the orphanage yard, kicking up dust in my wake. I wanted to get ready to step in my pink point shoes at any given moment. However, I wasn't quite sure if that would happen anytime soon. How I yearned for that dream. I thought about it day and night. I liked to walk my teacher to the orphanage gate every afternoon when she left. But one day, my teacher walked through the gate of the orphanage, and she was set upon by a bunch of rebels. They were filled with alcohol and drugs in their system. When they saw my teacher that she was pregnant, they went wild. I watched in horror as they threw her to the ground and cut open her belly. They began to gamble on the gender of the child. One of the men pulled out the tiny baby, and when he saw it was a baby girl and he lost his bet, he threw her into the bush. I slipped through the gate and went to my teacher's rescue, but by the time I was there, she was gone. Again, I lost somebody I loved. I tried to save my teacher's baby, but one of the child rebels caught me and tried to kill me, until the waterman from the orphanage begged for my life in exchange for his. He was one of the heroes in my fairy tale, but he would not be the only one. One night, the rebels invaded our orphanage and kicked us out. We found ourselves living in an empty field with no food and only water from the local village. The director of the orphanage decided to lead us over the mountains, about 120 miles over the mountains and through the jungle, to a UN refugee camp in the neighborhood country of Guinea. All of us arrived malnutritioned, exhausted, and sick with chicken pox. Sorry, I'm a dancer. My feet are already hurting in my heels. In Guinea, I learned that I would be adopted by an American family. I had mixed feelings about this. Though I desperately needed somebody to love me, I knew that this would mean I would be separated by my beloved friend, Mabinti Suma. Again, I would lose somebody I loved. But I would have no matter in the say. Soon we were taken from Guinea and flown to Ghana. I had been airsick on the flight, felt miserable, and when I stepped off the plane, I smelled of vomit. Then I saw her. Her short hair was the color of the sunlight and stuck up all over like the ray of the sun. Her eyes were the color of the sky. My fairy godmother had arrived. "I'm your new mama," she said, as she reached for my hand. Then I thought my heart would burst as she reached for my sister, as she reached for Mabinti Suma's hand as well and led us away. Is this a happy ending to the fairy tale? Not yet. There's more to tell. Later in our hotel room, I searched through every nook and cranny of my mother's luggage, expecting to find my pink point shoes and my tutu. Because isn't that what happens in every fairy tale? But they weren't there. When my mother figured out what I wanted to do, she said, "You will dance." Once we were in the United States, I met another hero. He was my American father who supported my dreams to dance through years and years of dance tuition and thousands of dollars on point shoes. Before I went to my first class, I begged my mother to buy me a turtleneck sweater turtleneck leotard to hide all my spots. But then once I put the leotard on, it was so hot and so itchy, I took it off right away and put on my pink leotard and pink tights. For a long time, I dreaded looking in the studio mirrors and seeing those spots. But eventually I forgot about them and focused on my dancing. I studied ballet for the next 13 years. At first, I went to ballet once a week, and then by the time I was 10 years old, I was going to dance 6 days a week. Those years, I produced an ocean amount of sweat, used tubes of ointments on my sore muscles, and wore approximately 650 pairs of pointe shoes. During those years, I was confronted with jealousy, insecurity, and of course, my terrible fear of losing those I loved. It was my mother who guided me in her mysterious ways that I couldn't recognize, which led me to overcome my fears and sorrows and accept myself for who I am. It was another one of my heroes, my beloved older brother, Teddy, who taught me how to lighten up, have fun, laugh, and most of all, overcome my fears of young men. After all, the rebels had frightened me so badly, who were young men, and I brought that fear with me from Africa. How happy I was in my new world, where everything was possible and where I didn't need to fear of losing somebody I loved. Then the worst thing happened. When I was 9 years old, my beloved Teddy died. He was 24 years old. For years, I did not believe he was terribly ill. I thought, as I watched him decline and my parents tried to get me to accept it, I refused to confront the possibility that he would die. So again, I lost somebody I loved. As a result, I had a tough few years as a teen, fearing to love because it always led to heartbreak. But eventually, my parents managed to convince me that though the people I love may die, their love will always stay with me because it is a part of what makes me who I am today. Finally, I reached adulthood, and after all those years of hard work at the ballet bar, and all those years of learning to cope with all the adversity I had been handed in my life, I leaped onto the stage as a professional ballerina. I had made my dream come true, the dream that had started as a little orphan girl in a hot, dusty orphanage more than 15 years ago when that magazine was blown into my face. Though I had once denied that my life was a fairy tale, I now believe that it is. For like a fairy tale, my life is full of hard work, suffering, heartache, and loss, but it was also one full of joy, love, achievement, and daring to dream. Through my fairy tale life, I want to encourage young people to aspire to live, love, and dream. Remember that there are always problems in fairy tales. No matter what your circumstances are, no matter how sad or how poor you are at any given moment, dare to dream. Dare to overcome all the negativity. You might think you have no talent, but everybody's born with talent. You might not be able to dance ballet, but there are probably a million other talents, from writing song lyrics, to repairing bicycles, to baking the world's tastiest cupcakes. Dare to make your talent a part of your dream. Never be afraid of the witches and ogres in your life. Look to the heroes and the fairy godmothers. Remember that in every fairy tale, good ultimately triumphs over evil. Work at making that happen so the promise of a happily ever after ending is realized. Thank you.